What do you do when the most feared man in Asia is dying on your operating table and every surgeon before you has failed? Korean billionaire Park Jun-woo, the shadow emperor of Korea's largest criminal empire, had a secret lodged in his chest that 13 of the world's best surgeons couldn't remove. They tried everything. They flew in specialists from every corner of the globe. They used equipment worth millions. And still, he was dying. Until a night shift nurse from Chicago walked into his room at 3 a.m. and saw what no one else could see. She wasn't supposed to be there. She definitely wasn't supposed to solve a medical mystery that stumped the finest surgical minds in the world. But she did. Before we begin, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more interesting stories like this every day. The private medical wing on the 47th floor of the Hanseong Tower didn't exist on any building plans. No elevator button led there. No hospital records acknowledged its presence. If you asked any official in Seoul about it, they would tell you the 47th floor was mechanical equipment and storage, nothing more. But inside its sterile white walls, surrounded by medical equipment worth more than most entire hospitals, Park Jun-woo was slowly dying. He'd been the youngest crime lord in Korean history, built an empire from nothing by the age of 32, controlled shipping lanes, construction contracts, entertainment companies, and things that never made the newspapers. They called him the Ghost King because his enemies had a habit of disappearing, because he moved through the shadows of Korean society like smoke, because no one could touch him. Until 3 months ago when someone finally did. The assassination attempt happened at his own birthday party. A waiter with a concealed explosive device. Jun-woo's bodyguards had spotted him seconds before detonation, but seconds weren't enough. The blast killed 3 people and sent a piece of shrapnel directly into Jun-woo's chest, where it lodged millimeters from his heart. 13 surgeons had attempted to remove it. The first was Dr. Nakamura from Tokyo, renowned for cardiac procedures. He opened Jun-woo's chest, located the fragment, and began extraction. Halfway through, unexpected bleeding erupted from seemingly nowhere. Jun-woo flatlined on the table. They brought him back, but the fragment remained. The second surgeon was Dr. Williams from Johns Hopkins, flown in on a private jet within 24 hours. Same result: mysterious bleeding, cardiac arrest, emergency stabilization, fragment still lodged in place. Surgeons 3 through 13 came from London, Geneva, Singapore, Berlin, each one more decorated than the last, each one armed with different techniques, different approaches, different equipment. Each one failed in exactly the same way. It's as if his body is rejecting the surgery itself, Dr. Nakamura said, after reviewing all 13 attempts. I've never seen anything like it. The fragment was slowly migrating, moving millimeter by millimeter toward Jun-woo's heart. At current rate, he had maybe 2 months before it reached the cardiac wall. After that, the slightest movement could kill him. Park Jun-woo, the man who had survived assassination attempts, rival gang wars, and decades in the criminal underworld, was going to die because of a piece of metal smaller than his fingernail. Maya Thompson had been working as a night shift nurse in Seoul for 8 months when everything changed. She'd come to Korea running from failure. That's what it felt like anyway. Back in Chicago, she'd been on track. Nursing degree from Northwestern, top of her class. Fast-tracked for a position in the trauma unit at Rush University Medical Center. Everyone said she had a gift for noticing things other nurses missed. The slight change in a patient's breathing, the barely there tremor in their hands, the symptoms that didn't quite fit the diagnosis. Then her grandmother got sick. Alzheimer's, progressive, devastating, and expensive. Maya moved back home to care for her, used her savings, took out loans. Watched her grandmother slowly forget her name while the medical bills piled up like autumn leaves. Then Marcus happened, her fiancé, the man she'd trusted with her heart and, stupidly, her finances. He was supposed to be handling the bills while she worked double shifts. Instead, he was handling himself a new apartment with a new girlfriend in Los Angeles, funded by Maya's credit cards and the emergency account she'd been building since she was 16. He left a note. "Sorry, babe. You were too focused on the old lady to notice me leaving. Guess you're not as observant as everyone says." The cruelty of it still burned. After her grandmother passed, Maya sold everything, paid off what she could, and ran. Korea seemed far enough. She'd studied Korean in college, loved the culture. thought maybe she could teach English and nurse on the side until she got back on her feet. Reality was less romantic. Her nursing credentials didn't transfer easily. English teaching jobs wanted younger faces. She ended up working night shifts at a mid-tier hospital in Gangnam, changing bedpans and checking vitals for patients who looked through her like she was furniture. A black American woman in Seoul, invisible, overlooked, just the way she preferred it now. The job offer came through her supervisor on a rainy Tuesday night. "Private patient," Supervisor Kim said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Long-term care. Night shifts only. The pay is—" She paused, checking the paper in her hand as if she couldn't believe it. "5 times your current salary." Maya's heart nearly stopped. "What's the catch? No questions, no records, no talking about what you see, and you sign an NDA that would take 3 lawyers to understand? That's a lot of catches. That's a lot of money." Supervisor Kim slid the paper across the desk. "I'm supposed to offer this to Nurse Yoon, but she has a family, kids. I figured you might be more flexible." Flexible. That was one word for desperate. Maya signed the NDA, took the job, and 3 nights later found herself standing in a secret medical wing 47 floors above Seoul, staring at the most dangerous man in Korea. He looked nothing like his reputation. The Ghost King was supposed to be terrifying, larger than life, the kind of man who made other powerful men nervous. The man in the hospital bed was pale and gaunt, struggling to breathe. His skin had a grayish tint. His cheekbones jutted sharply from a face that had clearly been handsome before illness carved it hollow. He was connected to more monitors than Maya had ever seen in one room, each one tracking a different vital sign, all of them telling the same story. This man was dying. The imaging display on the wall showed a continuous real-time scan of his chest. And there it was, the fragment. A tiny, dark spot, sitting millimeters from his heart like a patient predator. "Another nurse," Junwoo said when she entered. His voice was weak, but his eyes were sharp, assessing her the way a shark assesses movement in the water. "How long until this one quits?" The previous nurses had lasted between 3 days and 2 weeks. Maya had read their files. All of them cited personal reasons for leaving. She suspected the real reason was sleeping in that bed, looking at her with those calculating eyes. "I don't quit," Maya said, pulling on her gloves and checking his IV lines with practiced efficiency. "I'm too stubborn and too broke." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or interest. "Honest. I like that. Everyone else around me lies. I'm not around you, I'm your nurse, there's a difference. Is there?" He watched her check his monitors. "You're in my space. You'll know my body better than most people. You'll see me at my weakest. That's not around me. That's my job. What you do with your life is your business. What your body does while I'm on shift is mine." She adjusted his oxygen levels slightly. "Now, are you going to let me work, or do you want to keep testing me?" He smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but genuine. "Work then. I'll save my tests for later." Over the next 2 weeks, Maya fell into a rhythm. Night shifts from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., monitoring vitals, adjusting medications. Watching the fragment on the imaging display inch its slow way toward Junwoo's heart. The room had rules. No personal phones, no contact with the outside world during shifts. Armed guards at every entrance who searched her thoroughly before she was allowed in. She understood. A man like Park Junwoo had enemies who would pay fortunes to know exactly how vulnerable he was. The doctors came during the day. Maya only saw them in passing, during shift changes. Dr. Nakamura was the primary physician now, managing Junwoo's decline rather than trying to fix it. He was a tired-looking man with kind eyes and a permanent furrow between his brows. "We're running out of options," Maya overheard him telling the family. "Every surgical approach carries the same risk. We're looking at palliative care now." Palliative care. Medical speak for making him comfortable while he dies. Junwoo never mentioned it. But sometimes in the deep quiet of 3 a.m., Maya caught him staring at the imaging display, watching the fragment's progress like a man watching his own executioner approach one step at a time. "Tell me about Chicago," he said one of those nights. It was 3 a.m., and pain was keeping him awake. Maya had learned that talking helped distract him from the worst of it. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. What it looked like. what it smelled like, what made you who you are. So Maya talked. About the South Side, about her grandmother's tiny apartment that always smelled like lavender and baking bread, about running through Bronzeville in the summer, chasing ice cream trucks, about her mother, who'd left when Maya was 4, about her father, who'd stayed, worked 3 jobs, and died of a heart attack when she was 15. My grandmother raised me after that, Maya said. Her and my brother. He was 3 years younger than me. Marcus. She paused. She never talked about this. Not my ex, different Marcus, my baby brother. What happened to him? Maya was quiet for a long moment. The monitors beeped softly. Somewhere in the building, machinery hummed. He was 19. I was 22, in my last year of nursing school. He was walking home from his job at a grocery store. Wrong place, wrong time, drive-by shooting. She swallowed hard. I was at home when I heard the shots. I ran outside and found him on the sidewalk. Junwoo said nothing, just watched her with those dark, attentive eyes. I held him. I did CPR. I did everything they'd taught me in school. Kept his heart beating for 9 minutes until the ambulance came. Her voice cracked. He died anyway. Internal bleeding. Nothing I could have done. But you tried. I tried. She wiped her eyes quickly. That's why I became a nurse. I couldn't save him. So I learned how to save everyone else. And how many have you saved? Not enough. Never enough. Junwoo was quiet for a long moment. Then he said softly, I've never saved anyone in my whole life. I've only taken. There's still time to change that. Is there? He glanced at the imaging display, at the fragment creeping toward his heart. I'm not sure time is something I have anymore. Then make the time you have count. He looked at her differently after that. She couldn't quite name what changed, but something in his eyes softened. The shark was still there, but now she could see something else underneath, something wounded, something almost human. 3 weeks into her assignment, Maya noticed something. It started as an itch in the back of her mind, a feeling that something didn't fit. She'd learned to trust that feeling. It had saved patients' lives more than once. She was reviewing Junwoo's surgical records, comparing the 13 failed attempts, not because anyone asked her to. Nurses weren't supposed to question doctors, but Maya had always been better at noticing patterns than following rules. Every surgery had failed the same way, unexpected bleeding from a secondary site, every single one. 13 different surgeons using 13 different approaches, and they all hit the same complication. That wasn't bad luck. That was a pattern. She pulled up the imaging scans from each surgery, studied the fragment's position, tracked the bleeding sites, cross-referenced with the approach vectors, and then she saw it. A shadow, so tiny it was almost invisible, hidden directly behind the main fragment, masked by its larger sibling. No, she whispered. No way. But the more she looked, the more certain she became. There wasn't one fragment lodged in Junwoo's chest, there were 2. The second piece was minuscule, maybe 3 millimeters wide. It was positioned in a blood vessel directly behind the larger fragment, completely hidden on standard imaging, because the larger piece cast a shadow that obscured it. Every surgeon who'd tried to remove the main fragment had disturbed the smaller one. Every time it caused catastrophic bleeding. Every time they'd had to abort the surgery to save Junwoo's life. 13 surgeons, 13 failures, all because no one had thought to look for what they couldn't see. Maya's hands were shaking as she walked into Junwoo's room at 2 a.m. Mr. Park, she said, I need to ask you something. He looked up from the book he was pretending to read. At this hour? Must be important. Has anyone ever done a contrast scan specifically looking for a second fragment? Something smaller than the main piece? He frowned. They've done countless scans. That's not what I asked. Did they specifically look for a second fragment? He paused, thinking. I don't know. I assumed they checked for everything. Assumptions kill patients. Maya pulled up the imaging display, pointing to the shadow she'd noticed. Look at this. Right here, behind the main fragment. Do you see that variation in the shading? Junwoo leaned forward, squinting. It just looks like part of the fragment. That's what everyone thought. But I've been studying your surgical records. Every operation failed because of bleeding from a secondary site. The same site. Every time. She zoomed in on the image. I think there's a second piece of shrapnel hiding behind the first one. too small to see on standard imaging, but every time a surgeon tries to extract the main fragment, they nick the hidden one, and it causes the bleeding. Junwoo was very still. If that's true, removing just the main fragment is impossible. Any approach would disturb the second piece. That's why 13 surgeries failed. They weren't treating the whole problem. Can you prove it? I need a specialized contrast scan with different parameters. It'll show if there's a second fragment or if I'm wrong. And if you're right. Maya hesitated. If I'm right, a surgeon would need to remove both fragments simultaneously. It's a much more complicated procedure. Maybe only a handful of people in the world could do it. But it could be done. Theoretically. Junwoo stared at her for a long moment. Then he reached for the intercom beside his bed and pressed the button. Get me Dr. Nakamura now, I don't care what time it is. If you're loving this story, smash that subscribe button for more incredible stories every week. Dr. Nakamura arrived 20 minutes later, rumpled and irritated, clearly pulled from sleep. His irritation faded quickly as Maya explained her theory. A second fragment, he repeated slowly, hidden by the primary. It would explain the consistent surgical failures, Maya said. Every approach disturbs it. Every time you get the same bleeding pattern. That's a significant claim. Nakamura pulled up the imaging display, studying it with fresh eyes. The standard scans wouldn't show something that small if it's positioned directly behind the larger fragment. Can we do a specialized contrast scan? Different parameters looking specifically for secondary debris? Nakamura was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. It's worth checking. If you're right, if she's right, I might actually have a chance, Junwoo said from his bed, for the first time in 3 months. The scan was performed at 4 a.m. The results came back in 30 minutes. Maya was right. A second fragment, too. 8 millimeters wide, lodged in the posterior intercostal artery directly behind the primary fragment. Invisible on standard imaging. A death sentence hiding in plain sight. How did you see this? Dr. Nakamura demanded, staring at the results. 13 of the world's best surgeons missed it. They were looking at the obvious problem, Maya said. I was looking for why the obvious solution wasn't working. Nakamura shook his head. That's remarkable. That's Maya, Junwoo said. There was something in his voice that made her cheeks warm. Pride, maybe, or admiration. We need a surgeon who can extract both fragments simultaneously, Nakamura said, already thinking ahead. The primary is complex enough, adding a secondary target in a major blood vessel. Dr. Kim So-young, Maya said. Both men looked at her. I researched. She's one of 3 surgeons in the world who've successfully performed dual-target cardiac extractions. She's in Seoul. She trained at Stanford, practiced in Boston, came back to Korea 5 years ago. She's the best. Nakamura blinked. You researched this? I research everything. You should see what I know about the cafeteria menu. Despite himself, Nakamura smiled. I'll contact Dr. Kim first thing in the morning. Surgery was scheduled for 3 days later. Dr. Kim reviewed Maya's analysis and confirmed it immediately. This is excellent work, she told Maya during the pre-surgical consultation. You potentially saved this man's life by noticing what everyone else missed. I just did my job. No, you did far more than that. Dr. Kim smiled. I started the same way, you know, a nurse who noticed things. Have you ever considered medical school? Before Maya could answer, Junwoo's head of security appeared in the doorway. His face was grim. Mr. Park needs to see you. Both of you. Now. They found Junwoo sitting up in bed, his laptop open, his expression carved from ice. We have a problem, he said. What kind of problem? Maya asked. The kind where someone doesn't want me to survive this surgery. He turned the laptop toward them. My intelligence network intercepted this communication an hour ago. 3 of my rivals have pooled resources. They've paid someone on the surgical team to ensure tomorrow's operation fails. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. Paid who? That's what we don't know. Could be anyone. A surgeon, an anesthesiologist, a nurse, a technician. His eyes met hers. Could be you. The accusation hung in the air like a blade. If I wanted you dead, Maya said steadily, I wouldn't have found the second fragment. Unless finding it was part of the plan. Make yourself indispensable. Earn my trust. Get access to the operating room. then strike when I'm most vulnerable. That's absurd. Is it? Everyone has a price, Maya. Everyone can be bought. What's yours? She stepped closer to his bed, anger overriding her caution. You want to know my price? Fine, I'll tell you. She took a breath, fighting to keep her voice steady. I was 22 years old when I held my brother while he bled out on a Chicago sidewalk. I did CPR for 9 minutes. I felt his heart stop under my hands. I listened to him ask why he couldn't feel his legs, and I had to lie and tell him it was going to be okay, because I couldn't tell him he was dying. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. I became a nurse because I couldn't save him, because I needed to believe that his death meant something, that maybe, if I saved enough other people, it would balance out somehow. Tears were streaming down her face now. So my price, Mr. Park, is saving people. That's all I want, that's all I've ever wanted. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you've done. When you're dying, you're just another person who needs help. And I will never ever stop trying to help. Silence stretched between them. Junwoo's expression was unreadable. Then slowly he nodded. I believe you. Good. Maya wiped her eyes angrily. Now stop wasting time and help me figure out who's actually trying to kill you. They worked through the night. Maya, Junwoo and his head of security, a stone-faced man named Director Choi, reviewing personnel files, checking backgrounds, cross-referencing connections. The surgical team consisted of 12 people. Dr. Kim So-young, the lead surgeon, 2 assisting surgeons, an anesthesiologist, Dr. Park Min-seok, 3 surgical nurses, 2 technicians, a perfusionist, a monitoring specialist. Each one had been vetted by Junwoo's security team. Each one had passed background checks, but someone had been bought. At 4 a.m., Maya found it. Dr. Park Min-seok, she said, pulling up his file. The anesthesiologist. Director Choi frowned. He's clean. We checked him thoroughly. You checked his direct connections, but look at this. Maya pointed to a section of his file. His sister married into the Huang family 3 years ago. The Huangs have a cousin who's connected by marriage to the Kang organization, and the Kangs are one of the 3 groups your intelligence says are funding the sabotage. That's a distant connection, Director Choi said. 3 degrees of separation. Distant enough that your standard background check wouldn't flag it, but close enough that the Huangs could reach him without raising suspicion. Junwoo leaned forward, his eyes sharp despite his exhaustion. Pull his financial records. It took 20 minutes. Director Choi had access to resources Maya didn't want to know about. There, he said grimly. A payment of 500 million, one deposited into an account in his wife's name 6 days ago. Source is a shell company registered in Singapore. We can't trace it further, but the timing is damning. He's the anesthesiologist, Maya said. He controls the sedation. All he'd have to do is adjust the dosage at a critical moment. Make your heart stop on the table. It would look like a surgical complication. Junwoo's jaw tightened. So we remove him from the surgery. And say what? Director Choi asked. The moment we accuse him, he'll deny everything. We can't prove the payment is connected to the assassination plot. And if he warns his handlers, they'll just find another way. Then we don't accuse him, Maya said slowly, an idea forming. We don't give him any warning at all. We just make sure he can't be in that operating room. Both men looked at her. How? Junwoo asked. Maya smiled. Leave that to me. The next morning, 30 minutes before Junwoo was scheduled to be wheeled into surgery, Maya walked into the preoperative staging area. She was carrying a fresh pot of coffee for the surgical team. A small gesture of goodwill, nothing suspicious. As she poured coffee for Dr. Kim, she caught her foot on a cable. The coffee pot went flying. Scalding liquid splashed across the sterile instrument tray. Maya stumbled, grabbing the tray for balance, sending surgical tools clattering to the floor. "Oh my God," she cried. I'm so sorry. The pre-op room erupted into chaos. The contaminated instruments had to be re-sterilized. The floor had to be cleaned. Safety protocols demanded a complete reset of the sterile environment. Surgery was delayed by 2 hours. During those 2 hours, Maya slipped away from the chaos and found Dr. Kim in the surgeon's lounge. "I need to show you something," she said. "It's about the surgery." She explained everything. The intercepted communication, the financial trail, Dr. Park Min-seok's connection to Junwoo's enemies. Dr. Kim listened in silence. Her face grew paler with each revelation. You're certain? She asked when Maya finished. Certain enough that I staged that accident to buy time. Certain enough that I'm risking my career to tell you this. Dr. Kim was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached for her phone. Dr. Lee, she said when someone answered, I need you to scrub in for the Park Jun-woo surgery. Yes, I know it's short notice. Dr. Park Min-seok is... She glanced at Maya. Unavailable. I'll explain later. She hung up and looked at Maya. Dr. Lee is the second best anesthesiologist in Seoul. He's also my brother. I trust him completely. What about Dr. Park Min-seok? He'll be informed that his services are no longer required. Security will escort him from the building. Her eyes hardened. And then my legal team will have some questions for him. 20 minutes later, Dr. Park Min-seok was surrounded by security guards in the hospital corridor. He protested. He threatened. He demanded explanations. He was still demanding explanations when Director Choi's men escorted him to a windowless room in the basement of the Hanseong Tower. Maya didn't ask what happened to him. She didn't want to know. The surgery took 9 hours. Maya watched from the observation gallery, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She couldn't see much from up here, just the cluster of surgical gowns around the operating table, the monitors displaying Jun-woo's vitals, the imaging screens showing the 2 fragments that had nearly killed him. Dr. Kim worked with methodical precision. The first fragment came out at hour 3. The second, the one Maya had discovered, required another 4 hours of painstaking work to extract without causing the bleeding that had stopped every previous surgery. At hour 8, something went wrong. Alarms blared. Jun-woo's heart rate spiked, then dropped. For 3 terrible minutes, Maya watched medical professionals scramble around the table while the man she'd been caring for flatlined. Then, silence. The alarm stopped. Jun-woo's heart resumed its steady rhythm, and Dr. Kim held up both fragments, gleaming under the surgical lights. Maya burst into tears. She was still crying an hour later when Director Choi found her in the observation gallery. He's asking for you, the security chief said. His face was still stone, but there was something almost like warmth in his eyes. He's awake? Just. The anesthesia is wearing off. The first thing he said was your name. Maya found Jun-woo in the recovery room, pale and weak but alive, gloriously, impossibly alive. Hey, he said when he saw her. His voice was barely a whisper. Hey yourself. She sat down beside his bed, taking his hand without thinking. How do you feel? Like someone just spent 9 hours rummaging around in my chest. He squeezed her fingers weakly. You saved my life. Dr. Kim saved your life. I just found the problem, without which she couldn't have solved it. His eyes met hers. Don't diminish what you did, Maya. 23 doctors and 13 surgeons missed what you saw. You're remarkable. She didn't know what to say to that, so she just held his hand and watched him breathe. 3 weeks later, Jun-woo was recovering in his private room. The fragments were gone. His heart was healing. Color was returning to his face. And Maya's contract was ending. You're leaving, he said when she came for her final shift. It wasn't a question. My contract was for your care during the medical crisis. The crisis is over. I could extend it. You don't need night nursing anymore. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who want something from me. Money, power, protection, access. Everyone has an angle. Everyone wants to use me for something. Maya waited. You're the first person who wanted nothing except to save my life. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Why? That's literally my job. No, that's who you are. He reached into his bedside drawer and pulled out a thick folder. I had my people look into your situation. Maya felt her cheeks flush with anger. You had no right. Probably not, but I did it anyway. He held out the folder. Your student loans, your grandmother's medical bills, the money your ex-fiancé stole, the credit card debt he left in your name, all of it. That's private. It was private. Now it's paid. Maya stared at him. What? All of it. Paid in full. You have no debt anymore. He set the folder on the bed between them. There's also a position waiting for you at Seoul National University Hospital's trauma unit. Full salary, sponsored visa, housing stipend, and when you're ready, a full scholarship to any medical school in the world. The words didn't make sense. Maya picked up the folder, opened it, saw the receipts and confirmations and zero balances. It was real. All of it was real. "I can't accept this," she said. "Why not?" "Because it's too much. Because you're trying to buy my loyalty. Because I don't want to be owned. I'm not buying your loyalty, and I'm definitely not trying to own you." Junwoo's voice was firm. "I'm investing in someone who sees what others miss. Someone who saved my life by noticing a 3-millimeter piece of metal that 13 world-class surgeons overlooked. I'm just a nurse. You're a brilliant diagnostician who happens to have a nursing degree. There's a difference." He pushed the folder toward her. "Take it, not as a gift, as an investment. Pay it back by becoming the doctor you were always supposed to be." Maya looked at the folder, at the second chance it represented, at the life she could have. "One condition," she said finally. "Name it. I work for this. Every patient I save, every life I help, that's my repayment. I don't take handouts. I earn my way." Junwoo smiled. It was the first full smile she'd seen from him. "Deal." She took the folder. Over the next year, Maya thrived. The trauma unit at Seoul National University Hospital was the busiest in the country. Maya threw herself into the work, learning, growing, developing her gift for noticing what others missed. Her supervisors were impressed. Her colleagues respected her. Her patients trusted her. And somehow, despite her best intentions, she kept running into Park Junwoo. He showed up at a hospital charity event she was required to attend. He happened to be dining at the same restaurant where she was celebrating a colleague's promotion. He miraculously had business at a coffee shop 3 blocks from her apartment. "You're stalking me," she accused him one evening after the 5th coincidental encounter. "I prefer the term strategic proximity. That's stalking with better vocabulary." He laughed. It was a real laugh, full and warm, nothing like the sharp, calculating man she'd first met in that hospital bed. "Fine. I'm finding excuses to see you. Is that a problem?" "Yes, because you're a crime lord and I'm a nurse, and this isn't a K-drama where that ends well." "Former crime lord," he corrected. "I'm transitioning my business interests into legitimate enterprises." She raised an eyebrow. "Since when?" "Since a nurse from Chicago told me I could still change, that I could start saving people instead of taking from them." He met her eyes. "You said that, remember? In my hospital room. You told me there was still time." Maya remembered. She just hadn't thought he was listening. "You're serious," she said. "Completely. It turns out nearly dying gives you perspective. I don't want to be remembered as the Ghost King. I don't want my legacy to be fear and shadows. I want to build something that matters, something that helps people. And you think you can just walk away from that life?" "I think I have to try." He paused. "I also think I'm falling in love with you, which is terrifying because I've never been in love before, and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing." The confession hung in the air between them. "You're falling in love with me," Maya repeated slowly. "Unfortunately, yes." "Why unfortunately?" "Because you're smart enough to see through every manipulation I could try, principled enough to walk away if I disappoint you. And you've already seen me at my absolute worst, so I can't even pretend to be better than I am." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm completely out of my depth." Maya studied him. This man who'd been a shadow emperor, now standing in a Seoul coffee shop, looking terrified and hopeful and utterly genuine. "I have conditions," she said. "Of course you do. I'm not becoming a mob wife. If we do this, you become completely legitimate. No gray areas, no crimes, not even jaywalking. Already working on it. My legal team is restructuring everything. It'll take a few years, but by the time I'm done, Hanseong Corporation will be cleaner than a hospital operating room. I keep my career, my independence, my own money. I'm not a kept woman. I wouldn't want you any other way. You're not exactly the dependent type. And you meet my grandmother." He blinked. "I thought she passed away." "She did. But I visit her grave every Sunday. You meet her. You tell her who you are and what you've done and why she should trust you with her granddaughter." Junwoo was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "When can we go?" They went that Sunday. Junwoo stood before the grave of Eleanor Thompson, a woman he'd never met, and spoke honestly about who he was, the crimes he'd committed, the people he'd hurt, the man he was trying to become. Maya cried, not because she was sad, but because no one had ever taken her seriously enough to do something like this. "I think she would have liked you," Maya said afterward, as they walked through the cemetery hand in hand. "You think so?" "She always said the measure of a man isn't who he's been, it's who he's trying to become." Maya squeezed his hand. "You're trying. That counts." 3 years later, Dr. Maya Thompson stood in the emergency room of Seoul National University Hospital, leading a trauma team through a complicated case. "Everyone's missing something," she told her residents as they worked. The patient presented with chest pain, shortness of breath, and elevated cardiac markers. "Standard workup shows nothing definitive, so what are we not seeing?" A young resident raised her hand. "Could there be a secondary condition masking the primary symptoms? Something that wouldn't show on standard tests?" "Exactly. Always look for the invisible. Check for pulmonary microemboli. They're small enough to miss on standard imaging, but deadly if left untreated." The scan confirmed her suspicion. Treatment began immediately. Afterward, as the patient was stabilized and moved to recovery, Junwoo found Maya in the hospital garden. It was their spot, the place they'd come together to decompress after difficult days. "Another save?" he asked, sitting beside her on the bench. "Another lesson." She leaned against his shoulder. "Every patient teaches me something new." He wrapped an arm around her, his fingers brushing the wedding band on her hand. They'd married 18 months ago. Small ceremony, her colleagues, his cleaned-up business associates, and a framed photo of Eleanor Thompson watching over everything. "You know what I love most about you," he said. "My charming personality, my excellent taste in husbands, your ability to see the invisible." He kissed her temple. "You saw me, not the crime lord, not the reputation, not the ghost king. You saw a dying man who was worth saving. And you saved me, not just my life. Me. You saved me too," Maya said. "You just don't realize it." "How?" "You gave me back my purpose, my dreams, myself." She smiled up at him. "I was invisible when you met me. Lost, forgotten, you saw me too. Impossible not to. You're the most remarkable person I've ever known." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The sun was setting over Seoul, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere in the hospital behind them, Maya's residents were learning to look for the invisible. Somewhere in the city, Junwoo's legitimate businesses were growing, helping people instead of hurting them. Two broken people who'd found each other in the darkest moment of their lives, who'd saved each other, who'd built something beautiful from the wreckage. "Do you ever think about that night?" Maya asked. "When I found you on the bathroom floor. Every day. Really. It's the moment everything changed. The moment I stopped being the ghost king and started being just Junwoo, a man who almost died. A man who was saved by a nurse who refused to quit." He squeezed her hand. "Best night of my life, nearly dying." "That's morbid. But true. If I hadn't gotten sick, if my body hadn't been failing, I never would have met you. Never would have had the chance to fall in love with the brilliant, stubborn, impossible woman who saved my life with 3 millimeters of insight." Maya laughed, leaning into him. "We're a good story. The best story." He kissed her forehead. "And it's only just beginning." In the garden of the hospital, where she saved lives every day, Dr. Maya Thompson Park watched the sunset with her husband and thought about the woman she used to be. Invisible, struggling, running from failure. Now she was chief of the diagnostic training program, a published researcher, a teacher who showed the next generation how to see what others missed. A wife, a partner, a person who had been found when she thought she was lost forever, all because she'd noticed what everyone else had overlooked. A 3-millimeter piece of metal hiding in the shadow of a larger one. Sometimes the smallest things changed everything. The end. Final message. Never underestimate the person in the background. Never overlook the invisible. Sometimes the one everyone ignores is the one who holds all the answers.